April 1st, 1945. Field Marshal Walter Model stands alone in his command bunker, staring at maps that no longer make sense. His hands, steady through 5 years of war, tremble slightly as he traces the red circles marking American positions. Army Group B, 300,000 German soldiers is surrounded in the Ruhr industrial region. American forces from north and south have closed the noose. But Model isn't looking at the encirclement. He's looking at what lies beyond it, and what he sees makes his blood run cold. South of the Ruhr, General George Patton's Third Army has vanished into the German heartland like a ghost. Frankfurt captured, the main river crossed, central Germany wide open. Model picks up the phone to Berlin, his voice barely a whisper. There's nowhere to break out to. The trap isn't the encirclement. The trap is that Patton has destroyed everything outside it. For weeks, Allied planners focused obsessively on one objective: surround the Ruhr, trap Model's forces, cut off Germany's industrial heart. Montgomery in the north, Hodges moving from Remagen in the south, Simpson closing from the west. The plan was elegant, methodical, predictable. German High Command saw it coming. They prepared for encirclement, they stockpiled ammunition, they fortified defensive positions inside the pocket. They planned breakout routes to the southeast, toward Bavaria and Austria, where other German forces could cover their withdrawal. What they didn't plan for was Patton. While everyone else focused on closing the trap, Patton was already thinking 3 moves ahead. The question that obsessed him wasn't whether the Ruhr could be surrounded, it was what happened after. Where would 300,000 Germans go if they broke out? What defensive lines would catch them? Patton's answer was brutal in its simplicity. Destroy those lines before the encirclement even closes. March 22, 1945. Darkness on the Rhine at Oppenheim. No artillery barrage. No smokescreen. No airborne assault. Just silence. Then the soft splash of assault boats hitting water. Patton's the 12th Corps crosses the Rhine without firing a shot. German defenders, expecting massive set-piece assaults like Montgomery's operation to the north, have positioned their reserves elsewhere. By dawn, Third Army engineers are building bridges across the river, while German command is still trying to figure out what happened. Patton calls Bradley that morning, unable to hide his satisfaction. We're across. No fuss, no bother. Just crossed. The subtext is clear. While Montgomery needed an army of paratroopers and 3 days of preparation, Patton needed a quiet night and audacity. Within 48 hours, 3 entire corps are pouring across the Rhine bridgehead, not to join the Ruhr encirclement, to drive deep into Germany's interior and tear apart anything resembling organized defense. German 7th Army headquarters receives reports that should be impossible. American armor 30 miles beyond the Rhine. American columns bypassing Darmstadt before defensive positions can be occupied. American forces entering Frankfurt, while German reinforcements are still en route to the Rhine. General Hans von Obstfelder, commanding 7th Army, stares at the situation map in disbelief. His defensive plan called for fighting withdrawal, fall back to prepared positions. Delay the Americans, buy time for forces in the Ruhr to organize. But you can't execute a fighting withdrawal if the enemy is already behind you. How? He asks his chief of staff. How are they moving this fast? The answer is Patton. While other Allied commanders methodically cleared sectors and consolidated gains, Patton was conducting mobile warfare at a tempo the Wehrmacht couldn't match. His armored columns didn't stop to reduce bypassed scrum points. They drove through gaps, exploited confusion, and kept moving. German units preparing defensive positions found American tanks in their rear before the positions were ready. March 29th, Frankfurt falls. The city that should have anchored German defenses for weeks collapses in days. More importantly, Third Army seizes bridges over the main river intact. Now Patton has 2 rivers crossed and central Germany spread before him like an open highway. In Berlin, the maps tell a story German High Command doesn't want to believe. The red arrows, representing American advances, have punched through defensive lines that existed only on paper. 7th Army is not retreating, gone, shattered into scattered fragments with no communication, no cohesion, no combat power. From January through March, 3rd Army has captured 140,000 prisoners and inflicted 99,000 casualties. Those numbers represent the complete destruction of 2 German armies. Not damaged, not depleted, destroyed. General Alfred Jodl, Chief of Operations at OKW, studies the reports with growing horror. The Ruhr encirclement is closing as planned. But Patton's breakthrough has created a nightmare that makes the encirclement irrelevant. March 25th. Lieutenant General Courtney Hodges' First Army explodes out of the Remagen. Bridgehead with 3 corps moving in parallel. 12 miles the first day, 20 miles the second. By March 28th, First Army has driven 80 miles into Germany's interior. The advance isn't just about distance, it's about position. First Army wheels north toward Paderborn, while Simpson's Ninth Army drives south. April 1st, Easter Sunday, just after noon, near Lippstadt, reconnaissance elements from 1st and 9th Armies meet. The Ruhr Pocket is closed. Inside, 21 divisions, 5 corps, over 300,000 German soldiers. The largest encirclement in the Western Theater. Model immediately requests permission to break out toward the southeast. His message to Berlin is clinical, professional, hiding the desperation underneath. Army Group B requests authorization for organized withdrawal toward Bavaria. Current position, untenable for sustained defense. Breakout window closing rapidly. He doesn't mention what his staff officers are saying privately, that there's nowhere to break out to, because while Model was being surrounded, Patton kept moving. Third Army didn't stop at Frankfurt, didn't pause at the Main. Third Army was already deep in central Germany, destroying the very defensive lines Model hoped to reach. German, the 53rd Corps, positioned to cover potential breakout routes from the Ruhr, sent increasingly frantic messages to higher command. American armor approaching from the west. No contact with 7th Army. No reserves available. Request immediate reinforcement. The reinforcements never came because they didn't exist anymore. Patton had destroyed them. By early April, 3rd Army controlled terrain that German defensive plans assumed would be held by German forces. The breakout routes Model identified on his maps didn't lead to German-held territory. They led directly into American-occupied Germany. Model's staff prepared a detailed breakout plan anyway. Concentrate forces on the southeastern sector of the pocket. Punch through American lines with remaining armor. Conduct fighting withdrawal toward Bavaria. Link up with other German forces. Re-establish defensive front. On paper, it was feasible. In reality, it was fantasy. Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, Supreme Commander West, received Model's breakout proposal and faced an impossible choice. Authorize the breakout and acknowledge the Ruhr Germany's industrial heartland was lost. Refuse authorization and condemn 300,000 soldiers to eventual surrender or annihilation. Kesselring chose a third option: paralysis. His response to Model was a masterpiece of bureaucratic evasion. Hold all positions, maintain defensive integrity, further instructions to follow. The further instructions never came. Because what could Kesselring say that wouldn't be an admission of defeat? That Patton's breakthrough had made the Ruhr Pocket strategically irrelevant. That even if Model broke out, he'd be leading 300,000 men into regions already overrun by American forces. That the defensive depth necessary for organized withdrawal no longer existed. All true, all unacceptable to say out loud in Berlin, where Hitler still demanded miracle victories and punished defeatist talk with execution. Inside the Ruhr Pocket, German soldiers waited for orders that made sense. Junior officers asked their commanders when the breakout would begin. Commanders asked their generals. Generals asked Model. Model had no answer. He knew the military reality. Continued resistance was pointless. He knew his duty, obey orders from Berlin. He couldn't reconcile the two. German troops began surrendering in groups. Not desertion, calculated decision. Why die for a lost cause? Why fight for a regime that was clearly defeated? American forces reported entire companies marching toward their lines under white flags. Officers at the front, these weren't broken men fleeing combat. These were soldiers who'd done the math and realized the war was over. By mid-April, organized resistance was collapsing. Not from American pressure, but from internal recognition that continued fighting accomplished nothing. April 15th, Model convenes his final staff meeting. Around the table sit generals who fought with him through 5 years of war. Some argue for breakout despite Berlin's orders. Others insist obedience to the end. Model listens in silence, his face a mask. Then he speaks, his voice quiet but clear. Gentlemen, I release you from your oaths. Make whatever decisions your consciences dictate. Army Group B headquarters is dissolved. The room erupts in shocked protest. Model raises his hand for silence. The decision is made. 2 days later, April 17th, Model drives into a forest near Duisburg. He takes his pistol from its holster. A Prussian officer to the end, he cannot surrender and will not order his men to die for nothing. The single shot echoes through the trees. Field Marshal Walter Model, Hitler's fireman, the master of defensive warfare, chooses death over the impossible choice between duty and reality. The final accounting is staggering. Over 317,000 German prisoners from the Ruhr Pocket, the largest mass surrender to Western Allies in the entire war. Larger than North Africa, larger than Stalingrad, but the numbers don't capture the real story. The Ruhr Pocket wasn't defeated by the encirclement. It was defeated by what Patton did outside the encirclement. German High Command communications from early April reveal this with brutal clarity. Kesselring's report to Berlin: American advances south of the Ruhr have progressed such that breakout operations would accomplish no strategic purpose. Even successful withdrawal from Pocket would place forces in regions already occupied by enemy. Translation: Patton destroyed the escape routes before Model even asked permission to use them. The trap beyond the trap. The catastrophe layered on catastrophe. Third Army's advance through central Germany continued without pause. By mid-April, Patton's forces were driving toward Czechoslovakia, having covered distances that should have taken months in a matter of weeks. German units in the path of Third Army's advance weren't fighting. They were disintegrating. Officers who tried to organize defensive positions found their soldiers gone surrendered, deserted, or simply walking away. The Wehrmacht's command structure was suffering terminal collapse. Not from firepower, though American firepower was overwhelming from speed. Patton moved faster than German commanders could think, faster than orders could be transmitted, faster than defensive lines could be established. Every German defensive plan was obsolete before execution, because the terrain it was designed to defend was already in American hands. This was mobile warfare at its purest, not attrition, not methodical advance. Pure operational maneuver designed to shatter enemy cohesion and make organized resistance impossible. The strategic implications rippled across the entire Western Front, with Army Group B destroyed and southern Germany wide open. There was nothing between Allied forces in Berlin but scattered remnants and Hitler Youth battalions. The war in the West was effectively over. German commanders knew it. German soldiers knew it. Only Berlin refused to admit it. But Berlin's refusal changed nothing. Patton's breakthrough had created irreversible conditions. The Ruhr Pocket was the symptom. Third Army's rampage through central Germany was the cause. Model didn't lose 300,000 men because American forces surrounded him. He lost them because Patton made the encirclement strategically decisive by destroying everything outside it. The military lesson is profound. In modern mobile warfare, encirclement alone is never enough. What matters is the operational context surrounding the encirclement. If escape routes lead to friendly territory and reorganized defense, encircled forces can be extracted or can tie down enemy forces for extended periods. But if escape routes lead to enemy-occupied territory and shattered defenses, encirclement becomes a death sentence. Patton understood this intuitively. While other commanders thought tactically surround the Ruhr, Patton thought strategically. Make the Ruhr irrelevant by destroying German capacity to do anything after breaking out. His operational philosophy was validated completely. Speed and deep exploitation weren't just force multipliers. They were war winners. By late April, Third Army was the most powerful American force in Europe. 18 divisions, over 540,000 men. Unstoppable momentum. Patton wanted to drive to Berlin, to Prague, to end the war on terms that would shape the post-war settlement. Eisenhower, thinking politically rather than militarily, held him back. That decision's consequences would reverberate for decades. But in April 1945, Patton had already achieved something remarkable. He'd proven that operational art, the level of warfare between tactics and strategy, could be decisive. That maneuver warfare executed at tempo the enemy couldn't match, could shatter armies without needing to destroy them in battle. The Ruhr Pocket surrendered because Patton made surrender the only rational choice. The German High Command's communications during those final weeks reveal an organization that had lost connection with reality. Orders demanded counterattacks that couldn't be executed with non-existent fuel. defensive lines that couldn't be manned with scattered forces, resistance that couldn't be sustained with collapsed logistics. And through it all, threats of execution for defeatism, for unauthorized withdrawal, for surrender. The command structure that should have provided clarity instead created paralysis. Officers who wanted to save their men's lives were bound by orders to sacrifice them pointlessly. Soldiers who wanted to surrender were threatened with treason charges. The result was collapse that could have been managed, deteriorating into catastrophe that couldn't be controlled. By contrast, American command communications showed ruthless clarity. Bradley's orders to Patton: exploit success, maintain momentum, destroy enemy capacity for organized resistance. Simple, achievable, aligned with strategic objectives. The contrast explains why one side won and the other lost. The human cost was substantial, but revealed important truths. German casualties in the Ruhr Pocket, thousands killed and wounded, died for no strategic purpose. The Pocket's fall was inevitable from the moment Patton crossed the Rhine. Every day of continued resistance was simply delaying the inevitable while producing more corpses. Model understood this. His final decision to dissolve Army Group B headquarters was an acknowledgement that continued command was murder, not leadership. American casualties, while significant, were far lower than expected given the size of the force being destroyed. This reflected both firepower advantages and the reality that many German soldiers chose survival over pointless death once they understood the situation clearly. The mass surrenders weren't cowardice. They were rational calculation by men who'd done their duty but wouldn't die for a regime that was clearly defeated. Patton's role in the Ruhr catastrophe is often overshadowed by the dramatic encirclement itself. History remembers Model's surrounded army, the massive prisoner count, the symbolic end of German resistance in the West. But the encirclement was only possible because Patton created the strategic conditions that made it decisive. His breakthrough south of the Ruhr destroyed German defensive depth. His advance into central Germany eliminated escape routes. His operational tempo prevented German forces from reorganizing. Without Patton's operations, the Ruhr encirclement would have been a tactical victory. With them, it became a strategic catastrophe that ended the war in the West. That's the difference between good generalship and great generalship. Good generals win battles. Great generals create conditions where the enemy has no good options. Patton didn't just defeat German forces, he made their position impossible. The final lesson of the Ruhr Pocket transcends World War II. In any conflict, encirclement is only as decisive as what lies beyond the encirclement. Surround an enemy force that can break out into friendly territory and you've created a tactical problem. Surround an enemy force with nowhere to go and you've created a strategic catastrophe. Patton understood this instinctively. Model learned it too late. The 300,000 Germans who surrendered in the Ruhr weren't defeated by the armies that surrounded them. They were defeated by the army that made the surrounding matter. Third Army, Patton's army, the force that broke the Wehrmacht's back, not through attrition, but through speed, audacity, and operational brilliance that German commanders couldn't counter. April 1945 proved what Patton had always believed. In modern war, speed kills, not just tactically, but strategically. Not just armies, but hope. If this deep dive into Patton's strategic masterpiece and the collapse of German resistance fascinated you, then you need to subscribe to this channel immediately. We bring you the untold stories from history's greatest conflicts, the moments where individual decisions shaped the fate of nations, the human drama behind the grand strategies. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our next video. Because history isn't just dates and battles, it's the impossible made real. The moment when everything changed, the decisions that echo through decades. And we're bringing you those stories, one video at a time.